Okay. Okay, Emily, as you can tell by my name, and this is Megan, and today we're going to open up our new series of Women Bible. This is something I'm super excited for. I don't know about you guys lately, but I feel like just lately in the world with social media, there's just been a lot of talk about like women and the power of women and stuff. And I know for me, that can get really overwhelming being a woman. So I think right now to do this study is really cool and really fitting. Yeah, and so our topic today is just what does God think of women? It might seem a little bit like okay, but I know I've read the Bible a few times, and this is the same God, like, you know, just context and stuff. So we just thought it'd be a good idea to open it up with just a general overview of what does God think of women. So I don't know if y'all have seen it, but I just put the video that Ava beautifully made, and we'll just watch it quickly here.
I'm not getting any sound.
Yeah, me neither. I thought it was just me, but I didn't want to say anything.
Okay, can you hear it? I'm so sorry.
Pursuing a relationship with him in order to grow yourself into a better person, a more God-honoring person. What does it mean to me to be a woman of God? To be a woman of God to me means to be part of something bigger than us, to be part of God's kingdom and His family. And being a woman specifically means to be part of a bigger sisterhood and just ways that we as women can also lift up the world through Jesus. My first thought is just like a woman who just surrenders her life to the Spirit of Jesus and allows Him to work in all parts of her life, you know? I don't know, God created women and God created women with purpose to reflect His image in a different way than He created men to reflect His image. To me, being a woman of God means being someone who is incredibly faithful in every day and can really see and bring out the best in the people around me. Living in God's peace every day, and just any anxiety and stress that I may go through, I can feel comfort and rest in God, and just try my best to live the life that Jesus has planned for me, and becoming who He wants me to be, and finding my identity only in Him. It's a great privilege and something that I will always cherish and just be super thankful for.
So yeah, so that's our little intro video. I love it. Gives me chills every time I watch it. But yeah, now Meg is just gonna share a little disclaimer.
Okay, hi guys. So our little disclaimer, before we get into things, is that, like Emily said, our focus in doing this study is to just talk about women in the Bible and what God thinks about women and the way that Jesus treats women and those types of things. And that's obviously where we're going to be focusing on today. But you know, the Bible is a really complicated book, and it kind of says, there are parts that say some crazy things about women and complicated things about women. And we just wanted to acknowledge that, like, there are lots of different interpretations of some passages in the Bible concerning women, and all kinds of passages in the Bible anyways. And yeah, and we know that those things are hard, and some of those questions might pop up while we're talking even tonight, or even as we go along in this series. And we don't want to sidestep those questions because we think that they're really important and they're really valuable. And we want to invite you guys to, like, if there's something that you hear that's like, what? Or like, if you want to bring up something that we don't even necessarily touch on, you are so welcome to do that. This is, we want this to be a safe space where we're able to wrestle with things with each other and with Jesus, and yeah, encourage one another in that way. And just kind of as like an encouragement as we go into some of these topics that can be a little bit more difficult to, interpret. We just have this verse, Ephesians 4:3, that just says, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace, which is such a beautiful reminder that what unites us is just so much bigger than what divides us. We're all just sinners here, saved by the grace of Jesus, and that's why we're here, and that's so good. So that's that's our little disclaimer. Okay, so getting into it, I feel like, so we're gonna look at Genesis 2 a lot today. Yeah, because that's kind of just goes back to, God's purpose and his intention in creating women. And I think that it's so important to address that, and we can't not talk about that. And I think sometimes when we think of gender, we think of the differences. We think it's women on this side and men on this side, and women have their things that they do and men have their things that they do. And there's a lot of like division. And obviously, as women, especially in society now, especially, there's a lot of hurt in the differences. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of just like tension, in differences, right? But that's actually not what God emphasizes in creating gender. And I think that that's such an interesting and a beautiful thing that I didn't necessarily think about when, like, I know, when just like being a girl who goes to church, like I didn't really think about that. So the verse that I have here is Genesis 2:20. And so this is when Adam is naming all the animals. So it says, the man gave names to all livestock and to the birds of the heavens and to every beast of the field. But for Adam, there was not a helper fit for him. And so I was talking to my mom about this stuff, and she kind of had this idea, and it's like and it's a little bit of an interpretation, but I think it's a really interesting thing to think about. And she was kind of like, the concept of women, or like like two of each kind, were kind of like made before God created Eve. Like there were all of these animals that were just like that Adam kind of had the opportunity to name. And as he's like naming all of these animals, what he realizes, and kind of I guess what God is showing him, is that there isn't anyone like him. He's kind of alone. And I think it's something that's really cool, is that that's right when God creates Eve. And he doesn't create her with the purpose to be like, she's different than you. He creates her with the purpose that she is like you. You are both the same kind. Men and women are the same kind. And it's not about difference, but it's about unity. And I think that that's a really cool thing. And I think it's a really good baseline thing to remember too, as we're talking about women and gender and all of the complicated, messy things about it, that at the very core, at the beginning, we're all human, and we're all called to be in unity in that way, which I think is really cool. So on to you, Em.
Okay, so the next thing that we want to talk about is just the image of God. So, yeah, we're like we said, we're kind of focusing on just Genesis and like the creation story because that's kind of where it all starts. So, the verse here is Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And just like, I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard that verse before. It's very common, but it's just really cool because he's talking about creating the image of God. And from reading the verse, you can see that you can't have the full representation of God without male and female. As it says, male and female, he created them. It's not just male, it's not just female, it's not male or female, it's male and female. And I don't know, I just think that's like really important to recognize that together as male and female, we represent the image of God. And just also too, like we as women reflect the image of God. And yeah, I just think that that's as simple as it may seem, it's also just a good thing to establish and just be like, yeah, it's like as a woman, I too reflect the image of God. And yeah, and then what's really cool is when you're reading the whole creation story, the last thing that God creates is woman. So women are the pinnacle in the creation story. So creation was not completed until women were created, which means God's image was not completed until women were created. And I just think that's really cool because it's not like God was like, oh yeah, and I just created Adam and now we're over. And it's not like he was like, oh, okay, and then I created Adam and it was good. It was, no, he created Adam and then he created Eve and he said, no, this is good. And just kind of shows that like God made us for a purpose and we're included in creation for a purpose. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, I'll just like throw her in there for fun. It was, no, he has a purpose with creating women and making us a part of his image of God. And yeah, on to you, friend.
Okay, this is kind of a big thing that I so first of all, God is not a man or a woman. And that might sound like really like yeah to a lot of people, but to me that was like a game changer for me. And I'll get into that in a second. But just like kind of the first thing that or we have some questions usually when people say, well, God isn't a man or a woman. He is, what is he? Well, he's kind of some kind of encompass of both. He is spirit. He is so much bigger than gender. And for us to kind of sit here and try and fit God into this box of like stereotypical gender things is just like, I think that that's kind of like, I don't know what the right word is, but like kind of diminishing him like into this thing, and he's so much bigger than that, right? And so another question that I would have and people have is like, if God is not a man, then why did Jesus come as a man? Why did he come as like, why did he choose that? And I think that there's that's a great question and it's a good thing to think about. But I think that there's something really cool in the fact that he came as a man, because he came in the gender of power in order to teach the gender of power how to lay down their power, And the example that I kind of have with that is in the religious time that Jesus was living in, a lot of the religious leaders blamed women for their lust. Like they would be like, oh, if I'm lusting for a woman, that means that she's not being modest enough. She's not covering up because it's her fault if I do that. And Jesus comes in with this radical idea as he does. And he says in Matthew 5:28, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And like, that's kind of like a radical thing because he's saying, no, your sin is your sin and it's not on her. And that also can apply to us as women too. But yeah, I think that there's something really cool in Jesus coming as a man. And then another question with that is, if God is not a man, then why do we call him Father? Why do we call him him? Why don't we call God she, and things like that? And I'm going to pull up something that, well, there's a quote right there by my man John Mark Comer, who wrote God Has a Name and Loveology and Garden City. So many good ones, would recommend him. But there was a note at the back of his book, and it just says, a lot of people reading the Bible for the first time are turned off by the language father or he for God. Why not mother or she? And he says, to clarify, these aren't statements about God's gender, but about his nature. And I think that says something really interesting about what father means relationally to us. And also, too, there's that whole aspect of we refer to him as he's introduced himself. Jesus referred to God, he talked to God as his father, and it's written in the Bible that it like the Bible only refers to him as a he, so that was kind of just a thought about that. But 100% those are definitely still like, I don't think that those are like answers, you know, to like set answers to the question. There's lots of things that go into that. So those are just some thoughts about it from me. So and so I grew up in the church my whole life, and I started just kind of assuming things about God from a young age, and one of the things that I assumed was in the language used and stuff that, well, God's a man, and therefore men have a leg up. They're more like God than I can be because they're a man and God's a man, you know? And that's kind of just how I thought about things. And I don't know, it was always kind of like, I don't know, it didn't make me feel, I think it was a hindrance that I didn't even know was in my heart, you know? But when I heard people say like, hey, God isn't a man, he's not a woman either, he is spirit, I was like, that was mind-blowing. And it was just something that I needed to hear. So I just wanted to bring up some ways that how can we as women reflect God's image in a different way than men can? Because it talks a lot about father in the Bible, but I also wanted to draw your attention to some of the times that God is also referred to as mother in the Bible. And so an example is in Matthew 23:37, when he says, how often have I longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. And there's kind of that idea of Jesus is referring to himself as a mother hen, and he cares for and protects us in the same way that a mother would protect her child. And another verse is in Deuteronomy 32:18, when he says, it says, you were unmindful of the rock that bore you. You forgot the God that gave you birth. And that's kind of this other idea of God being a mother. He is creator of all of everything. And there are so many more verses about mother and words that have typically female connotations with them. And it just goes to show that like us in our womanness, in, for example, being a mother, that is reflecting God's image, you know? There's purpose in just being a woman, you know? Because it shows God to the world in a different way than men, you know? And it just really kind of goes back to what Emily said about how we both reflect God's image. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. So there are some other verses here that show another way that we reflect God's character, and I'm just going to share those. So the first one is, our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. And that's from Psalm 33:20. But I am poor and needy. Hasten me, O God. You are my help and my deliverer. O Lord, do not delay. And that's from Psalm 70, verse 5.
But how does a helper reflect one of the ways that we reflect God? Because my girlfriends, my sisters in Christ, you are an Ezer. So in Genesis 2:18, the Lord God said, it is not suitable for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. Now, if you translate the word helper in Hebrew, the word means Ezer, which means mighty rescuer, saver, military force, to rescue, to save, to be strong. And that is what the Lord is calling you. The Lord is saying, like, my daughters, you are an Ezer. And what's even cooler is the word is used to describe God many times in the Bible, like Megan just shared. So my question for you is, does God see us as helpless or weak? No. God is an Ezer, and so are we. And last year, at school, I learned about this whole concept of what an Ezer was. And I remember hearing this, and just, it kind of really changed things for me. And it just made me feel like, yes, like I am a woman of God. And I think sometimes, like, you know, growing up in the church is kind of like, oh, well, God created Eve for Adam. You know, like God created Eve just to be there for Adam. Like her only purpose was to serve Adam. And even reading it, I will make a helper suitable for you. Oh, like her only purpose is to help Adam. Like, you know, I mean, reading that, I wasn't like, oh yeah, like I'm here to help Adam. Like, you know, I was like, yeah, I'm just like, I guess I was just made to help, like, you know. And then when I learned what that word really meant is like, no, you're an Ezer. Like you are mighty, you are strong, you rescue, you save. And then hearing too that like, that's how they described God. And that's how God is describing us, was just something really powerful. And I hope if you guys have heard that before, or if you haven't heard that before, that can just be empowering towards you and just encourage you in the sense that like God didn't just create you for someone else. God created you for him. God created you to reflect his image, to reflect his kingdom. And one of the ways that we can do that is being the Ezer that God has created us to be, being that helper in his kingdom. And yeah, I just think like as women, sometimes we're kind of told like, you're too emotional, you're too weak, like you're too vulnerable. You can't, I mean, women couldn't vote for how many years because we were like considered to have irrational thought. Like, you know, just, I mean, you all know this, we're all girls. Like there's been a lot of discrimination against women in the past and even in the church. And that's why Christianity was actually so appealing to women, was because Jesus came and he radicalized that. He gave women position in the church. He let them be a part of the church, and that was something so foreign. And yeah, I just want to remind you all, like, no, you are not this weak, vulnerable, irrational person. Like, you are this strong woman of God who reflects his kingdom. And I'll say it again, like, girl, you're an Ezer. And I just hope that you can all soak that in and just be able to say that over yourself, because that's what God's saying of you. And yeah, so anyways, on that note, that's kind of the end of our overview here. Yeah, so we just wanted to like touch on a few things, but we have some questions. They're very broad, but I would love to hear what everyone has to say. And then obviously, once we go through those, if you guys have any more questions or any comments, literally anything, feel free to chime in. Yeah, and you can just chime in whenever, turn off your mic. I love this time in Bible study. But yeah, our first question is just like, how does this make you feel? Like knowing what you know now, maybe you knew it before, maybe this is brand new to you. How does this make you feel? So the next question is, how is this going to change your walk/relationship with Christ? Like, and maybe it's not, maybe it's already knew this, and this was just an encouragement, or maybe for me, I know for me, it was a pretty, like, I walked out of there, because I was told this at school, this whole Ezra concept, and I walked out of there and I called my mom on the phone, who was like 8 hours behind my time, and I was like, Mom, do you know that you're an Ezer, Mom? And she was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, Mom, you have to know this. And I like, for just like a couple days there, I just was on like this high of like, I'm an Ezra, and like, what does this mean for me? And so for me, I would say it changed a lot of things, but maybe it doesn't, and that's totally fine too. It doesn't have to change or affect anything. But I'm just curious, we're just curious to see if hearing this affected or is going to change aspects of your walk or relationship with Christ. So anyways, after all that rambling, please feel free to respond.